So one of the reasons why when we put this session together, we want to talk about things that we want to talk about things that we don't want to do today, or what we're doing today. And why did we do that was because very few people have the time to do some stargazing, and this is a stargazing type event. So you guys are hearing a lot of things out there from a security perspective, and you guys are looking at a lot of things today. I mean, oh, I got to do vulnerability assessment. I got to look at my network. I got to do segmentation. I got to do framework-based assessments. All that stuff is great, but none of that stuff is going to help our customer, the end patient. So we're going to talk about a bunch of things that really helps that model. I'll introduce myself. This is Sri Bharadwaj from UC Irvine Health. I run the application portfolio for UC Irvine, the PMO as well as the CISO for the organization. Been a member of HIMSS and the HIMSS board for many years, past president of Southern California HIMSS, sit on the Public Policy Committee nationally, and past chair of the Privacy and Security Committee, National HIMSS. And many people in the audience are friends of ours in some way, shape, or form, and not just friends, but people whom we work with together and solving problems for a lot of other organizations as well. And I'll ask our friends on the left to introduce themselves and then share what they think about the future of healthcare security.
Hello, my name is William Perry. I'm the Senior Director in CISO for the City of Hope. I've been here now since May of last year. Prior to that, I was with the California State University as their CISO at the Chancellor's office. So I've been in IT and information security for a little bit over 30 years, unfortunately. It's a long time. And I've seen security go from purely tools to all about compliance, which is kind of where we're trying to get away from now, to getting into more about risk. As Sri mentioned, I got here and we're chasing down a lot of compliance assessments and gaps that we have to fulfill while managing, attempts to breach our data, protecting our HIPAA related data, our PCI related data, our PII data, and also facilitating an open network for our researchers and our physicians and our other constituents. So we have a lot of challenges in doing that with current technology and process. Some of the things that we're going to talk about that are forward-leaning or forward-looking that we'll talk about as we go forward. We'll speak to what those infrastructure builds should look like over the next few years. And hopefully provide and shed some light on some of that. And then we look forward to those who are vendors here to help us as we move forward in building out this infrastructure.
I'm Todd Felker. I'm the Information Security Officer for Torrance Memorial. I've been at Torrance Memorial for 13 years. I've been in a security role there for 5 years now. And before that, I worked for another healthcare-related software company. Probably it's changed hands several times now, but might best be known as MedAssets. I was there for 10 years. Kind of started just kind of building a security program at Torrance Memorial back in 2013, back before the Target and Home Depot and all those breaches that happened one after the other. So, and I've kind of been drinking from the fire hose ever since. It's been never a dull moment to try to build a security program while trying to stay on top and build something that can allow you to stay in touch and under the realm of the privacy and the security rules, and then deal with PCI coming in from the side as well, and just trying to take a whole organization that's growing and expanding and keep it safe and compliant, along with all of the evolving vulnerabilities and threats at an ever-increasing cycle. We've had a lot of good conversations earlier today about how to address those things, and we were just kind of asked to talk about how we look at the future and some emerging technologies that might help us along those fronts.
Great, thanks. Matt Christensen. I've been alive for over 30 years. So I am here to learn and truly appreciate working with individuals with no experience as well as those that are the most seasoned. I'm a risk-based security guy. I don't consider myself just cybersecurity. To me, everything at the end of the day comes to the risk and the reward and helping the business understand that and putting it in terms that they understand and can relate with. So instead of being the shop that just says no to things, it's let's talk through it, So my background is in fraud examination. I did international fraud examination and internal audit and cybersecurity. So thanks for allowing me to sit on the stage with these guys.
So I just want to pose to our panelists a tricky solution or a tricky problem that we encounter today, thinking a little bit about the future. So a patient's daughter brings in the Amazon Alexa, puts it in the room, which is a voice control device, if people who don't know what Alexa is, and it's listening to the patient's conversation with the physician, while at the same time she's recording that conversation because she's concerned about something happening to her dad, and that goes on to Facebook. Okay? In the meanwhile, she's asking Alexa questions, and Alexa is looking through Google and responding back to some of the terms that the physician is using that the patient does not understand. Look at the security and privacy ramifications around this. And if something happens, the data is flowing through your network. It's not going outside the network because the Amazon Alexa is connected to your guest network because it needs a MAC address. It's got a MAC address. It's got to get connected to the internet. It will. All you have to do is make it connect, and it will. What do? That is going to be a commonplace occurrence, probably in the next year and a half. We've already had one incident of that happen in UCI. Thoughts, feedback?
I guess I'll try to tackle some of that. To me, that's more of a legal conundrum because if we have today in all of our environments, people bring devices into our network, and they may be using the guest network, and it may be recording. It doesn't just have to be Alexa, but I agree there's going to be a lot more tools very similar to Alexa coming out. I think that strong policy, because again, going back to risk, for me, it would be about developing strong policy that is enforceable so that we, as an organization, take a stand on how we would deal with that. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean we can stop that. We can't stop all the breaches that occur, but our policies and the processes we follow when we have an exposure of data can mitigate the risk to the organization. And I think from my perspective, then I would include compliance and legal in developing a policy that protects the organization's risk from those types of things that will happen.
So here's the other aspect to it. I talked about this to a dozen CISOs, and they said it's not a breach, it's not an issue I need to deal with, because it's the patient sharing his or her own data with whom or he wants to share, and that's written into law. So so here it is, right? So this is a very tricky situation. It's going through our network. We don't have a choice. We have to protect it. But anything can be going through our network. We don't know, right? Because it's a guest network. So what policies, what structures, what processes can you put in place? Because it's going to be happening. I mean, the proliferation, $35 device, what is that called? Echo Dot. It's a very simple device to use, but it's extremely powerful. And it's a great tool for a patient. Because the patient, if the doctor is saying something and the patient doesn't understand it, all it's doing is basically translating that into some form. Instead of the patient putting it in, it's just sucking that information out of the doctor's voice and translating that back to the patient. Nothing wrong in it. But this is what is going to be happening on a day-to-day basis, because I guarantee people are going to be bringing in Echo Dots in their in their handbags and just leaving it there because they want to listen to the music that they have on Amazon Music, and just download that and play for me, stream it to me, right? So that's where we are struggling with you understand policies, but who is accountable, who is responsible, and why? You got an opinion? Give 1
I
second.
do want to add one
Yeah,
more
sure, go
thing.
ahead.
You stated that, I thought it was the daughter that brought it in.
Yeah.
But if the patient has documented that they're okay with their daughter recording their sessions, writing that down, then yeah, I would agree with you. But if the patient's daughter just brings it in, again, to me it's about BYOT and Internet of Things and how you write policies around those.
Correct.
Oh, no, it's great. It's funny. I hadn't heard this till just now, and my initial thought was, okay, what ports does Alexa use? Those MAC addresses on those devices, they must all start with the same characters. I'm going to go block those on my guest. But then, wait, that doesn't necessarily solve the problem, because the phones can be a mobile hotspot. They could have cellular reception, hopefully, in your hospital. So that doesn't stop the problem. The problem is not fixable with just technology, in my opinion.
Correct.
All you can do is set policy and educate your staff and give them some guidelines and say, hey, just so you know, if you see this, do this. Just tell them, hey, be aware that if this is there, it's recording you, and maybe verify it's turned off before you speak if you're the doctor. Otherwise, here's a form, a disclaimer that you could have them sign, before they do it, and give them some policy and some processes that they can follow to mitigate the risk, right?
Great. Matt?
Yeah, we used to worry about people bringing in their PlayStation and connecting it, and they wanted to just do it, play video games while they're staying, and then it got curiosity. It was like, oh, I can surf the internet over the PlayStation. This is like first gen PlayStation. It was almost a brick, but then we would see things like, oh, wow, now you're doing things that is against our policy. So I think what William and Todd hit on, I think it starts with the administrative policy, what's allowed, then it followed up by training. There's probably some technical things that we can add in that can say, well, we're seeing a lot of these pop up, but at the end of the day, where's that data stored at? If it's Alexa, it's stored on Amazon now, and now you've got medical guidance that is now on Amazon's cloud servers. These are the discussions that I don't know if all of us have the answer, but these are the ones that we need to be talking about, because
Correct.
This is where we're going in the future.
That is why I wanted to bring this as a topic for this discussion, because we don't have all the answers, guys. I'm talking to the vendors here as well. We don't have all the answers. But this is our situation today. This is where we are today. So here is what we did. One of our security guys sat down with the patient, helped them understand why having the Alexa switched on in the room is not the best thing for the patient. Talked to the daughter, helping her understand recording this and posting it in Facebook is not the right thing to do. And help the patient understand this is what it may be great to look at it as a good technology, but this is what's really happening to your privacy, right? It's not about security no more, it's about privacy. So now the patient is we're not educating our staff, we're not educating our employees, we're not educating our clinicians, we're going one more level down. We're educating the patient, whom we never had responsibility for. HIPAA doesn't tell you anything about anything to do with patient. It talks about protecting you and protecting PHI that you control. This is not PHI that you control, it's PHI that's out there. So it's a very different phenomenon, it's a very different structure. So for the folks in the audience, guys, this is why this topic is so relevant, that you guys need to understand our lives is not about just protecting PHI within our environments. It's protecting PHI as a whole across the patient environment. It's a very different phenomenon. It's something that we are all grappling with, and we don't have all the answers. I talked to my attorneys as well, and he's like, I don't know what to do. That was the response I got. And it's interesting to say that that's what it is. Here's the other example. Switching topics. Blockchain.
Before we go to blockchain, can I
Go
make
ahead.
one more comment?
Sure.
The generation that makes up a third of the workforce is the millennial generation. I don't think they're becoming any more less transparent as these technologies come about. A police officer can't pull anyone over now without being filmed every step of the way, right? And I think you're going to start to see more of these devices and that type of scrutiny and transparency because they feel they have that right now going to the internet. I mean, you'll be live streaming a doctor giving a patient advice now. That's the type of transparency that generation expects.
Right. Go ahead.
One more thing. So yeah, I mean, would the doctor notice if the patient was wearing Google Glass and and streaming it? And I think there was an incident either 1 or 2 years ago where a patient, before they went under anesthesia, had their phone on record, and it was right next to his bed when he went into the OR, and he didn't like some of the things that the surgeon said while he was under, and on the table. And I think that was used in some litigation. So, you kind of have to have your staff treat like, you're always being recorded just to make sure to protect the
So
organization.
that's a different realm. So they don't teach this in medical school to docs. Seriously, I know this for a fact. They do not teach this to medical school docs. They probably hint on HIPAA, and that's about it. And they say, well, you're going to go work in the workforce. In the workforce, you got to go get taught. And Alan will vouch for that. So it's not something that they teach you on how do you manage voice control devices by a patient. And that's not even in the curriculum. And I know when running a school of medicine, that's never going to happen in the near term because they've got other things to worry about. So if we look at that, and if we look at, and then you go down a path of saying, the patient's saying, I want to control my data, right? This is my data, I want to control it. That's when you bring something like a blockchain, right? You bring something like a blockchain that allows you to manage who sees your data if and when you control your data. So there is I don't know, folks, you know about this or not. There is a document, paper written by Dr. John Halamka, who is the CIO of Beth Israel Deaconess, which is the Harvard Medical School. And he and a bunch of folks documented what blockchain is and how blockchain can be used in healthcare. A product called MedRec. There's another organization called GEM, that does blockchain work. I'm part of a blockchain exchange program where we talk about blockchain on a regular basis. In fact, we're educating CIOs on what blockchain is and why we should look at blockchain as a way to help propagate patient data for various physicians. So here is a use case around blockchain. A patient got surgery for his knees about 10 years ago, and he now sees his cardiologist for a abnormal heart condition. He does not want to share the fact that he had knee surgery with that physician because he wants to control the data. The blockchain technology from a distributed perspective allows you to distribute the data across. As long as you have access to view it, as long as you have the, the consent to view it, you can view the data, subject to the fact that the patient allows you to view the data. So in this case, how would you use HIPAA as a measure, number one, to protect the patient data? Number two, how would you allow him to do it in such a way that he's free and fair to do that? And number three, what is a regulation out there that really helps sharing this? Do we have all the answers? No, we don't. But this is a situation that we can grapple with. Thoughts, feedback?
Okay, I'll go first. Although I think you probably know far more about this topic than I do, but I've been reading up on it. So, blockchain would be a fundamental shift, giving control to the patients instead of the health institutions that are performing procedures of the data. And I think like you said, the regulations around blockchain are not there for that sort of a fundamental shift in the way data is controlled. I think that it's fundamentally it's exciting, the thought to be able to move away from something like PKI infrastructure, and where you have a central ledger and you're trying to manage these keys for the life of the data. It feels very clunky when you compare it to a technology like this, but it's kind of mind-blowing, the types of changes that would be involved for healthcare organizations to adapt to that. But I think it would accomplish what we're looking for. I think the office of the national coordinator has a goal to get the EHR fully shared by 2024. I think without a technology like that, I'm not sure how likely that really is. So I think that it has a lot of promise. I think we need to put a lot of thought into it, and invest in it. I think without some incentive, healthcare organizations today have too much going on their plates in order to really think about this, unless there was some incentives.
And let's look at City of Hope itself. They are doing tons of clinical trials that will probably help tons of patients, lots of patients worldwide, where people may not even have access to this level of care. And if somebody can share that information, let us say my cousin who's in Australia is having the same issue, I'd be able to share that with my information as long as it's my information, right? And so now what happens? What happens to the clinical trials? What happens to the data that's delivered through clinical trials? Today we control it because it's delivered to only single patients. But once patients start sharing that information right out the world, you lose competitive intelligence. So that is a big factor that really will have to play a role in how we manage this information. And we have to have the right infrastructure in place, the security controls in place to make sure that that information doesn't just walk out the door. Because now you lose that ability to control how you use those data for clinical trials and so on and so forth. Not that everybody will do it, but there are countries out there. Take China, for example. I mean, they'll be able to benefit from this a lot. Guys, you have no clue. I was part of a panel where we talked about the Chinese trying to hack through university information so that they could get hold of IP that they could replicate much faster than what the university was trying to do. That is unbelievable. And we found that when we were thinking it was the Russian guys, and it's really not the Russian guys, it was the Chinese. And they had almost built a prototype using that technology, because there is no IP protection when it crosses the borders. And your border is as far as space can see. So there is no border anymore, right? The world is flat. So that's where we really need to understand, how do we make sure we get this information and figure out how do we protect this information. That's why, when we develop technologies around blockchain or technologies around another thing that we can talk about, genomics, there's a huge request now to use 23andMe data to look at how that information can be used for patients' care. So if I know for sure I have the variant for dementia, and can help my doctor understand that that variant is already present through my sharing my genomic data that I get from 23andMe, make it part of the EMR. Now what? Now what? You've got 23andMe data from the patient that's in the EMR, which you never thought you would ever have, number one. Number two, you'd be able to get all of the Fitbit data from the patient and stick it in the EMR, which you never thought you'd store. You'd take all of your medical device data from the patient's home and stick it in the EMR, because that's all data that you need. So if you look at it, 95% of healthcare data is outside the healthcare system. How do you protect data that you don't have in your hand while you could be exposed to the data just because you have it in your system? The minute it gets into your system, you got to protect it, you got to manage it, you got to deliver it, you got to protect everything associated with it. Who has access to it? How many times they have access to it, and so on and so forth. So think about how, as CISOs, if we have to help our CIOs build through how do they manage genomic data, how do they manage research data, how do they manage clinical trial data, how do we allow a secure blockchain technology, how do we have voice control devices that helps our patients improve their care. And all of this is new technologies that are very cheap. It's not expensive. I mean, $150 to get a genomic information. And how many of you guys know once you get the genomic information from 23andMe, you can send it to somebody in China who can develop your additional variants and against it and give you additional information? It's unbelievably easy to do. And they do it for $10. All you have to do is send them a file. That is where we are today. We are at the crossroads of what I would call changing the way we think about healthcare. But the CISOs in this room are still thinking about how do I solve my vulnerability problem? How do I do my assessments? How do I protect my bits and bytes? It's changing, it's shifting the way we think, it's shifting the way we operate.
So
Thoughts?
from a non-CISO perspective, I may never get a platform like this again, so I'm taking advantage of it. Blockchain needs to be thought of as an additional layer of security, not the layer of security. Just like encryption isn't the layer of security, or firewalls, or ACLs. It needs to be thought of as an additional, and I think it's incumbent on us in this room and in our industry to educate senior leaders as this isn't the silver bullet. I think it will help us get there. But how long? AI was developed when? 1955-ish, right? That was the first documented development of AI, and we're now really just reaping the benefits. I hope that we aren't 70 years out from getting the benefit of blockchain, but I also hope we don't jump to putting all of the medical data there first to be the clinical trial for blockchain. Prove it out in other industries, prove it out even in the payer market. Take a payment from, go through the claims process with blockchain and see how that works. Prove it out, then put the patient's medical data.
Yeah, I would agree with my colleague Matt, and something Matt said earlier, and I think Sri touched upon it. You know, we're no longer going to be the repositories of patient data. The patient is going to control the data. And so from a legal perspective, I think the laws need to be reviewed and the ethics around how that patient can utilize that data and the responsibility of actually owning your data as opposed to it being centralized, because we own a lot of the responsibility for the data. With regard to genomics and those companies that collect or give you your genomic background based on some DNA evidence they pull from you, part of the challenge that I see, and one of the reasons I haven't done it yet, is I have concerns about privacy, and I think that until some laws are solidified around how the companies deal with that data, I wouldn't want them marketing that data, let's say, to an insurance firm to determine that my gene type has a higher propensity for health or heart disease, and then so my insurance rates go up because they looked at my genomic record. Or the police are investigating a case and they just ask all of these genomic companies to send in the DNA samples so they can run them in, and now we have a large DNA database. Maybe I'm being a little big brother, 1984, but I'm concerned about, until we have appropriate ethical discussions about how this data is managed, retained, and used, I think it can become a little thought-provoking that it's being collected at such a large rate. I see the commercials every day about it. So those are my concerns. around
Ancestry.com.
Yeah, Ancestry.com as well. So
Just out of curiosity, how many of you have done the genomic testing? So probably a quarter, maybe not that much, but yeah.
I mean, we can't stop the flood. I don't want to say that those who've done it, you've done anything wrong. Our data is out there. It's in our best interest to continue to review what is promulgated out there and protect ourselves as best we can. Whether you get the DNA testing or not, eventually your data is going to be placed in some large database for companies to analyze to determine how best to market to gain revenue from that. And that's why we have all of these breaches. It's about revenue.
So let's take a hypothetical example. If you were given that data and you had your patient had cancer, and you had data for about 10,000 patients, who you had all the genomic data for those patients, I guarantee your docs will be like extremely happy, because I'm sure they'll find a variant, they'll find something there, and they will say, that is going to cure this patient for sure. How would you stop that?
I think, again, for me, it's about the ethical use of that data. If you're using that data and it's anonymized, but you're looking for certain key elements to determine, some cause or preventative approach to curing something like cancer, then definitely. Again, it's the ethics of what it's used for. If you're using it just to market so you can charge me more for insurance as opposed to charging my friend Sri here a higher amount for insurance, then that's incorrect. And I think we can all agree with that.
Great.
But from a doctor's perspective, from a researcher's perspective, definitely, let's utilize this big data to help them in their research.
So Intermountain has a company that they've spun up recently called Navican. I think many of you are familiar with that. It's a precision genomics. So I think what Sri had mentioned earlier and William had mentioned earlier, it's you go to get the test to find out I guess it can paint a picture for you that you could be more likelihood for certain things. You've seen actors and actresses actually have surgeries done based on the studies that were conducted in that precision genomics. I think, it's still this uncomfortable, is this for the benefit of mankind or is it for the benefit of an organization? And it is an ethical thing that I think people are going to have to just decide for themselves. I'll be the first to say that if I am unfortunate enough to receive those 3 words that were mentioned earlier, you have cancer, I'm going to do everything I can to help in that. Now, does that mean I hold on to it until that comes? 1 in 3 of us will have that happen to us in our lifetime, right? I don't think it does, but there's a certain level of comfort that I think is necessary, and we're going to have to depend on these new technologies, I think, for us to grow and scale with that.
Just walk around this. So, what Gary's talking about is like what I would call a health score. You got a credit score, and you create a health score, and your premiums and your surgeries, and even in some respects, the number of days you're hospitalized, because you have a propensity to get healed faster, means you have a much better way to get a surgery done quicker and get out of the hospital. If you're looking at a health score to evaluate, is this person good for it? Forget the lab results, forget the MRIs, forget the CTs. You're just going to go, okay, I need a better health score, and you're going to start. Is that where we are going? And can I share my health score with my doc in such a way that I can get the benefit of, I got a better health score, so I'm going to pay less for my care? Can we get there? Is that something that we can share? Are we patients? Are we, from a privacy and security perspective, is that something we will do one day?
I'd love to hear the payers. I wish we had payers in this room because, they are just dying to have that score that you just spoke to, because if you can have a population that has a higher health score, guess what that does to the premiums, right? And so it's a huge tool for them. Everything that can be used for good can be used for bad, I guess.
Yes,
right?
of course. Already happening. I mean, HMOs were born based on that principle. That's how HMOs were really, came into being. So it's a very interesting question. Reputational risk is something that um we should be taking more interest about, but we don't as CISOs. Let me be very frank and honest. We are more worried about how do I protect my walls rather than figure out how to protect the reputation. I mean, this is. I mean, I'm sure many folks in the room will share that same feedback. However, our jobs are changing. Our jobs are changing to understand what does that reputational risk really mean. Because in the past, it was more like you got the data, you got to protect it in the data center, put in encryption, put in all the technology, you're fine. It's no more that way. It's no longer enough. So one of the things that we are looking at from a UCI perspective is we are educating our staff on things that is really coming to them because they don't even know what's out there. I mean, some of our nurses, they have Amazon Alexas in their house. I guarantee it they do. But have they ever thought that they're going to have this patient walk in and use that information against them? No. Because whatever the nurse says is being recorded even if the person is sleeping in the room, right? And they can use that to sue these guys. They don't know that. But that's where we are educating. The reputation is important for us. Let's not do this. Let's help you guys figure this out. So our job is changing. Our job is becoming more educational. Our job is becoming more, how do I call it, coaching and helping folks understand the real threats that's happening in the industry.
I'd like to speak to that as well. So when I got to the CSU, that question was asked of me, how do we protect the CSU's reputation? Because we've had some extensive data breaches, both internal data breaches and external. And there is no simple answer. I mean, the actual analogy I gave the CFO that asked the question was, even if I have my seatbelt on, hands on the right part of the steering wheel, driving the speed limit, I can still get into an accident. But what we can do is we can align ourselves to best practices. So building out our policies based on a known framework, high trust, ISO, NIST, whichever you choose, or any of those sets of controls. We can educate our users. I'm big on education. We have a small staff to protect the City of Hope, so I'd rather train everyone to be even Gary, to be an information security expert, so that he is now watching out for what he's doing. All of these things are helping to reduce the risk of our reputational loss based on patient data exposure. And then finally, well, not finally, but the third component would be implementing best-in-class processes around PCI and how we store data and how we transfer data across our network. And then finally, we look at tools, whether they're the current tools. I agree with my colleague here. We're not so concerned about what's within the walls, but how do we allow folks to access our data in a more dynamic way that their authentication increases depending on the types of systems and data they're trying to access and where they're accessing it from. So we utilize those tools and AI and machine learning tools to understand our current base level authentication and access levels. And if someone's doing something outside of that, to alert us. All of those things, I think, are key elements of reducing risk to your reputation based on an incident occurring. But even with all of those things, you're still subject to an issue. So again, and I hate to keep saying this, but going back to policy, if you have strong policy that says, here's the process we take when we have this incident, you have a better chance of reducing that risk to your organization in the event of a risk breach.
I would like to find out if a hacker is selling the data, how can that be legal? Because the minute it's a hacker and the minute he's selling the data, the payer doesn't know where he got the data from, but he gets the data, right? That's how it is. I mean, that's the marketplace, guys. I mean, the marketplace dictates the price you pay for the data you get. Very simple. I mean, social security numbers are no longer a piece of information that anybody's worried about. I probably get you for about 10 cents, probably even 5 cents per name, social security number, no big deal. I'll just generate a printout and give it to you. Try Google and put in various technology names, you'll find social security numbers in a heartbeat. But it's not about that. It's about how they use the data is more important rather than how they get the data, right? And how they use the data, there is no way you can say this is what they can do with the data. Because today they do a lot of things with the data which we don't know even. If you guys have seen the data warehouse of large health plans, it's mining. That's what they do today to figure out what is going on with their patient population. And as they dictate their provider contracts based on demographics, based on what's happening with that patient population, that's how capitation works. I mean, capitation works based on what's happened in the past and based on what they know for the future. And that's how they capitate you with X number of dollars per member per month in order to help protect yourself. But all this data could be useful, could be very beneficial for a payer if they can get their hands to it. But then it's about not getting their hands to it. Or will they use it? I guarantee they will use it for sure, because that's one information they don't have. That's why the pharma companies are not allowed to do trials as openly as what we know about. Because they have to be open with what they're doing and how number of trials they've had, and the results of each trial is fairly public. But there is so much data out there that we have no idea how you can protect it, how do you use it, or how do you manage it. That's the situation today. And the more and more these things happen, and the more and more these things are exposed. I mean, I still have not seen somewhere where there is a Amazon Alexa voice captured data that's out on the internet that's being used by somebody. I still have not seen it. Not that it's not there. I have not seen it. And I'm sure it's there, guaranteed. If I go look at it, if I probably want to go prowl on the internet, I'll find it. And then if I go find a loophole on Amazon, I'll get it for sure. But I have not done it. I don't know if people have done it. But definitely there is use for the data. There's a lot of value for the data. And I guarantee at some point in time, if we don't protect it, it will be used, I shouldn't say against us, but at least definitely not for the profit of ours, for the profit of somebody else who's got the data in their hands. Last and final thoughts with the panel.
Well, if I could just speak to that.
Sure.
Just for a moment, and then that'll be part of my final comments. Look, we all know illegally gathered data is illegal. So hacking and utilizing that data for an insurance measure is probably not going to happen by major insurance firms. But the other question you asked about genomics, I've not looked at the contracts for 23andMe or all of these other companies. And I would suspect that the dollars that you pay for your DNA history is not their only revenue stream. I'm sure they're marketing their data to insurance companies. And so I don't know that there have been laws written to protect our data that's given to those types of firms. And so I think it's a good thing to look into and to review. I think there should be some privacy. Okay, well, thank you. So I didn't know that. I appreciate that. So if that's also illegal, then yes, then you can't, I'm sure a major insurance company would not use that as part of their cost basis. But in my final statement, I would like to say thank you all for being here. This is an exciting topic. It's not usually this exciting to talk about security. It's usually really boring. But we're talking about the future. It can always be exciting, and I'm glad I've had these peers to talk with and to hear their thoughts. And thank you for educating me on something that I had some concerns for. Now maybe I will go and get my G. So again, thank you for inviting me. I look forward to other discussions on cybersecurity and information security.
Yeah, just like was said, thank you very much for letting me participate in this, an interesting topic. In regards to, how I view security and going forward, I really do feel that it is a partnership with the organization. I'm very grateful for the people and the leaders that are here participating in this conference. I think that as security conversations have now reached the upper echelons of the organization, it's truly what needed to happen in order to deal with the environment that we're operating in. And just as I have a philosophy that says that security shouldn't impede clinical care and the treatment of our patients, and that we need to try to do security in a way that's as least obtrusive as possible, like was discussed, point was made several times today, it's also the responsibility of those that are working in other areas of the organization to take security and be educated and as up to date as they can on what are best practices. If you can have all the best tools in the place to protect the data that you know about, but as we talked about, there's places where data can come from that we weren't thinking of. So if we don't have everybody in the organization participating in a culture of security, if we don't have organizational goals that are built on awareness and this kind of cross-training and letting everybody know that security is part of their job along with patient care, then we're not going to be successful. So thank you again for having me here. Appreciate it.
Great. Two thoughts. One, an emphasis on collaborating. I think it starts within our own shop. Let's make sure we're collaborating with our teams and with our businesses, with our doctors, and then more importantly with our competitors and those within the industry. So collaboration. The second thing, let's make sure that we educate that there is no perfect security. As much as we all want it and strive for and stay up at night, that realization needs to be very real for the business, so that if there is a breach, they can talk through and say, these are all the things we did to defend, and they still got in, right? Rather than listing all the things that we didn't do that we should have. So a defensible security program is the key, I think, for all of us, and ultimately for our patients, right? They are what is at the heart of everything. So thank you.
So here's what I'd like to leave with. You heard of see something, say something, right? Let's practice that. Hear something, say something. See something, say something. Taste something, say something. Because I know if you're in a bad drug situation, if you have a situation that really impacted you, say something. So you can help other people not go through the same experience. And that's how we protect us as people. That's how we protect the data that we generate every day. I walk and I'm generating data in my watch. I run, I generate data in my Fitbit. I switch on my laptop, I'm generating data that goes into my VPN, right? We are generating data by the second. And don't expect us security officers to protect everything. Sorry, we cannot do it. We can only do so much, and we will do our best we can. We guarantee that we will do our best we can. But we want each of you guys and each of us to protect our data the way we believe we should protect our data. It's our responsibility, it's our prerogative. And let's make that our responsibility, our prerogative to protect data that we know we are generating by the second. I'd like to leave the group with that thoughts, and thank you so much for attending.